What's the price of obedience? What do you become when loyalty demands your voice? Some Decepticons lead with firepower, others plot from the shadows. And then there's Soundwave. He speaks in transmissions, echoes commands, but forgoes emotion. Across timelines and universes, Soundwave is constant, loyal, precise, unwavering. But obedience has a cost. The more he serves, the less he is seen, not as a person, but a function, a recorder, a spy, a shadow. He sees everything, hears everything, says almost nothing, and in that quiet, a question he never asks, but may one day answer. What happens when the perfect follower finally stops following? Because across every continuity, one truth remains. Soundwave is superior, and everyone else is inferior. This is Disassembled Heroes and Villains, and today, we're diving into the cold mind, the hidden heart, and the ultimate cost of loyalty and obedience, with the story of Soundwave. Soundwave didn't begin as a legend. He began as a watcher, not through fire or fury, but through the art of surveillance, observing and noting the movement of friend and foe alike. To understand how Soundwave became the quiet shadow of the Decepticons, we must return to the two earliest blueprints of his character, the original G1 cartoon and the Marvel Comics run of the Transformers. And while both present different versions of the same character, the core themes of obedience and control are already baked into his circuitry. In the original G1 cartoon, Soundwave is Megatron's most trusted agent, not because of charisma or battlefield prowess, but because he listens with quiet intent, serving as the team's communications officer. He intercepts enemy transmissions, deploys his cassettes as recon drones, and acts as Megatron's internal security system. He doesn't just execute orders, he facilitates Megatron's ability to lead. Like a nervous system, feeding information to the brain, Soundwave transmits, decodes, and redistributes everything, in a hierarchy built on domination. He's the invisible web that holds it all together. And in doing so, Soundwave becomes a fixture of Decepticon command. From the very first episode of More Than Meets the Eye Part 1, Soundwave distinguishes himself through the loyalty and tactical precision. When the Decepticons hijack the Ark and crash on Earth, it's Soundwave who's tasked with designing plans for a new space cruiser and directing the mission to gather supplies, sending Rumble to attack a nearby power plant to gather materials. His role is never questioned. He is trusted to gather intel, dispatch Laserbeak or Ravage for recon or intimidation, and ensure operations run smoothly. Throughout the cartoon's multi-season run, Soundwave is consistent, unchanging. While other Decepticons quarrel, betray, or disobey, Soundwave remains. In the arc The Ultimate Doom, where Megatron executes a plan to bring Cybertron into Earth's orbit, risking planetary destruction, Soundwave never flinches. He activates satellites, monitors feedback, and ensures Megatron's will is executed, even as the planet trembles and shakes beneath him. His reliance on the cassette core only deepens this connection. Laserbeak is often his eyes in the field, deployed for surveillance and reconnaissance. Ravage infiltrates enemy bases and executes sabotage. Rumble and Frenzy shake the battlefield itself. Each cassette acts as an extension of Soundwave's will, tools of information, misinformation, manipulation, and brute force. While each has a unique personality, even they are rarely addressed as individuals. They are part of Soundwave's arsenal, not his family. He deploys them with the same cold precision that defines him, but this loyalty comes at a price. Soundwave's personality is nearly erased, acting as a tool for Megatron, akin to how his cassette core are his tools. His voice, mechanized and monotone, communicates efficiency, not emotion. He's not asked what he thinks, he's asked to obey, and the more he serves, the less he is seen as a being with thoughts and feelings, and more as a function. This theme is reinforced in the Marvel Comics continuity, where Soundwave's loyalty, while still intact, is depicted with more nuance and sometimes manipulation. In the Marvel Comics series, Soundwave rises to power not just as Megatron's subordinate, but as a stabilizing force during a leadership vacuum, when both Megatron and Shockwave vanish following failed missions. Soundwave doesn't seize command with force or flair. Instead, he operates from the shadows, coordinating communications, relaying orders, and ensuring the Decepticon war machine continues without collapse. He isn't ambitious, he's essential, and his strength lies in preserving Megatron's legacy, not replacing it. He doesn't lead from the front, he stabilizes from beneath, threading the Decepticons together with a constant pulse of information. Where others fight for the throne, Soundwave keeps the throne from collapsing. However, his actions are calculated. His command over the cassette core is equally present in the comics. Laserbeak and Ravage are deployed to hunt and interrogate, and Rumble and Frenzy often serve as his enforcers. He uses them as extensions of himself, rarely speaking unless necessary. They are his network, a web of surveillance and control. In later Marvel storylines, Soundwave is manipulated, even hypnotized, but never broken. He adapts, recalibrates, and continues. The machine marches on. Later, when Grimlock reclaims leadership of the Autobots, and the factions descended at chaos once more, Soundwave begins to see the cracks in Decepticon unity, but even then, he plays his role, managing information, coordinating forces, and adapting to every new leader. When Ratbat assumes command, Soundwave adapts. When Starscream rebels, Soundwave adapts again. So whether it's G1's emotionless efficiency or Marvel's strategic manipulation, Soundwave begins as the ultimate follower. He gives up his voice, he molds his identity around a purpose, and in doing so, he becomes indispensable, but increasingly invisible. In these early incarnations, Soundwave doesn't just follow Megatron, he becomes the infrastructure of Megatron's power. The question isn't whether Soundwave is loyal, it's whether he knows how to be anything else. Soundwave began as the communications backbone of the Decepticons, but in the aligned continuity, he became something far more chilling, a ghost in the system. To understand his evolution, we must follow the signal back to Cybertron before the war reached Earth. Before the silence of Soundwave and Transformers Prime, there was the storm of war. In War for Cybertron, Soundwave stands as a frontline instrument of Decepticon power, calculated, commanding, and unflinchingly loyal, voiced with chilling reserve. His function isn't to dominate with strength, but to ensure the Decepticon hierarchy remains intact. He commands troops, deploys his cassettes, and oversees communication networks with unerring precision. In a world drowning in chaos, Soundwave is Megatron's constant, gathering intelligence, suppressing resistance, and directing battle strategy without personal ambition. By fall of Cybertron, the planet is crumbling. The Autobots are planning their escape aboard the Ark, and the Decepticons race to intercept. Here, Soundwave's role escalates. He coordinates the launch of the Nemesis, pilots operations against the fleeing Autobots, and maintains control as Starscream's insubordination begins to stir. His loyalty is unquestioned, his methods unrelenting. When Bruticus is deployed, when Shockwave experiments with the Insecticons, Soundwave remains at the center of the web, ensuring every strand leads back to Megatron. But the real evolution comes in Transformers Prime. Gone is the voice, gone is the ego. What remains is control. This Soundwave is nearly mythological in presence, voiceless, faceless, and feared. He doesn't speak, he doesn't need to. Every tilt of the head, every silent stare through his face screen evokes unease. He is both intelligence officer and executioner, drone commander and digital wraith. From the very first moments of Darkness Rising, Soundwave is watching. He hacks military satellites, eavesdrops on government channels, and deploys Laserbeak without needing orders. By Part 3, when Starscream attempts to cover up Megatron's death, Soundwave plays back the recording with quiet authority, exposing the lie and reminding everyone, including Starscream, that he sees everything. He is Megatron's insurance policy, his black box, his executioner in waiting. In episodes like Sick Mind and TMI, Soundwave enters directly into the fray, protecting Megatron's dormant body and extracting dangerous data from captured Autobots. His role is always active but never attention-seeking. Then in episodes like One Shall Fall, as the Decepticons clash with Optimus, Soundwave is the constant guardian, ensuring the bridge between order and collapse never falters. But when challenged, he does not flinch. When dealing with Arachnid, who tries to usurp authority and crisscross, Soundwave punishes her without a word, sending Laserbeak to incapacitate her and deliver a message of silence, more deafening than a shout. But his fellow Decepticons are not the only ones that catch his in tunnel vision. He faces off against Wheeljack and Raph, demonstrating not only brutal combat efficiency, but an eerie calm. He doesn't taunt, he doesn't gloat, he fights like a program, executing a kill command. In the episode Out of the Past, Soundwave tracks and captures RC and Cliffjumper, displaying not only tactical acumen, but sheer ruthlessness. When Wheeljack's past catches up in Conjob and Loose Cannons, Soundwave is often behind the scenes, tracking, listening, preparing. When Soundwave battles Smokescreen and RC aboard the Nemesis during Megatron's resurrection, his presence on the ship is that of a sentinel, one who never rests. And other exploits found in the episodes like -1 and Persuasion, he helps recapture Autobot fugitives and reasserts Decepticon control. His loyalty to Megatron never wavers. Even when Starscream plots and Dreadwing questions, Soundwave simply obeys. Yet, it's near the end of the series he meets his end not in defeat, but in exile. Thrown into the Shadow Zone, a dimension of phasing silence, Soundwave vanishes, but never dies. He simply waits, and when 2015's Robot in Disguise begins, that patience pays off. For most of the series, Soundwave is absent, but never forgotten. Whispers circulate. The war is over, but not everyone has fallen. In Season 2, his return is chilling. Freed from the Shadow Zone by a malfunctioning ground bridge, he emerges warped by dimensional exposure, but unbroken in loyalty. Even after Megatron's fall, Soundwave continues the mission. He hacks systems, sends coded messages back through space, and begins constructing a way back, not to conquer, but to reconnect. In Portals, he manipulates events from the shadows, pulling strings through Bumblebee's team and the Autobot base. In Worthy, Soundwave nearly escapes the Shadow Zone entirely, only thwarted at the last moment. But what stands out isn't just his tenacity, it's that he has no personal goal. He's not seeking power or vengeance. He wants to fulfill Megatron's old mission, no matter how long it takes. Even after the war, even after abandonment, Soundwave remains loyal. His design in Robots in Disguise is sleeker, more alien, stripped of cassette ports and transformed into a spectral wraith with digital weaponry and silent movement. His methods remain familiar: surveillance, sabotage, and silence. But his presence is more haunting than ever. He represents the past refusing to die, an echo of tyranny that lingers long after the shouting stops. In Worthy, his final appearance, Soundwave battles the Autobots one last time. The plan is simple: escape the Shadow Zone and transmit Megatron's signal to any remaining Decepticons. Even now, when corrupted by the Void, Soundwave believes in the cause, and when he is defeated, it's not with fanfare. He simply disappears, slipping back into the silence from which he came. In this final form, Soundwave is no longer a communications officer. He is the ghost of his former self, the last signal of a dead channel refusing to go quiet. He doesn't need to speak, because silence for Soundwave has always been louder than words. In the aligned continuity, Soundwave was a phantom, seen but rarely heard, watching the war from the edges of perception. His silence was power, his presence unnerving. But what happens when that silence is broken? What if, instead of a shadow on the battlefield, Soundwave was a voice among the people, a mind shaped by thought before the war ever touched him? In the initial IDW Universe, we meet a Soundwave forged not just by loyalty, but by ideology, and the cost of knowing too much. This is the Soundwave who remembers, and in remembering, changes everything. In most continuities, Soundwave is defined by silence, but in the IDW Universe, he begins with a voice and a choice. Before he ever compresses into a tape deck, before the word eject becomes synonymous with destruction, Soundwave is something else entirely: a telepath, a scholar, and a student of systems. And it is precisely because of this identity that his journey in IDW is not just one of loyalty, but one of moral evolution. To understand the Soundwave, we must begin not with the war, but with a curse, the gift of hearing too much. In the miniseries Megatron Origin, Soundwave appears not as a weapon, but as a troubled savant. His telepathy makes him both asset and outcast, and an individual who can hear the darkest whispers of Cybertron's elite, but cannot close his mind to their hypocrisy. Purpose: not revolution, not chaos, but order. For someone who has heard every lie the elite have whispered, the idea of truth through force is irresistible. This isn't where Soundwave becomes evil, it's where he becomes devoted. Decades later, in Spotlight Soundwave, he resurfaces on Earth in the 1980s, no longer a victim, but a strategist. Here, Soundwave is reborn in function and philosophy, cold, efficient, tactical. In this issue, Soundwave confronts Bludgeon, who seeks to resurrect Thunderwing using unstable Ultra Energon, but Soundwave doesn't intervene out of morality. He moves because Bludgeon's actions jeopardizes Megatron's control and the Decepticon hierarchy. Even in opposition, Soundwave acts to preserve structure, loyalty, not ideology or ambition, in his guiding principle. When Thunderwing awakens and unleashes destruction, Soundwave is caught in the blast. He is presumed dead, locked in stasis. While others fight or posture, Soundwave listens. From infiltration through escalation and devastation, his role is subtle but indispensable. He monitors communications, enforces operational discipline, and suppresses dissent. In Stormbringer, he appears briefly, always in the background, never the fist, always the eye. Soundwave doesn't crave power. He ensures it flows uninterrupted to Megatron, and all hail Megatron, the Decepticon abandon subterfuge and wage all-out war. Earth falls, Cybertron is fractured, and Soundwave? He thrives in this new regime of pure hierarchy. He operates as an enforcer and propagandist, policing both internal communications and ideological drift. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it is to reinforce the chain of command, or to silence insubordination. His silence is no longer defensive, it is weaponized. In the first volume of the Transformers and later in Robots in Disguise, Megatron vanishes. Starscream rises. The old order begins to unravel. Soundwave doesn't seize power. Instead, he disappears into the wilderness of Cybertron's post-war frontier. There, he organizes scattered Decepticons, broadcasts encrypted messages. It begins something unthinkable: education. He recounts stories of the war, not to glorify violence, but to preserve meaning, to give disillusioned Decepticons a reason to remember who they were, not just what they fought for. He becomes a kind of ideological librarian, archiving a fractured legacy. This is the midpoint of his transformation, no longer just a loyalist, but a custodian. In the Optimus Prime series, Soundwave crosses a final threshold. He allies with Optimus. This is not betrayal, it is consistency. The war is over. Survival now depends on collaboration, not conquest. Soundwave's loyalty becomes more abstract. Loyalty to stability, to communication, to peace. He joins Optimus Prime's efforts on Earth, helping mediate conflicts between humans, Autobots, and Cybertronian exiles. While many, including RC, question his motives, Soundwave proves himself through restraint, action, and deep ideological introspection. He listens to refugees. He offers guidance to younger bots, including emotionally volatile characters like Lynx and Needlenose. And although Rubble is more directly mentored by Bumblebee, he acts as a kind of spiritual compass in the background, promoting dialogue over domination. At one point, he tells Optimus, "Words are weapons, Prime. They can also be bridges." This is the moment Soundwave stops echoing Megatron and starts evolving beyond him. In the final arc, Unicron, Soundwave stands with the Autobots. The Planet Eater's arrival unites even bitter enemies. But Soundwave's sacrifice is not simply pragmatic. In Unicron issue 4, as the threat looms, he transmits a galaxy-wide signal that disrupts Unicron's advance, allowing the heroes a critical reprieve. The act consumes him. He dies not by blaster or blade, but by message. His final act is communication, an echo so powerful it disrupts annihilation. And in that moment, his silence becomes resonance, and in that resonance, we hear what Soundwave has been trying to say all along. We are not forgotten. We are still here. Soundwave's arc in the IDW continuity is not one of redemption in the traditional sense. He does not beg for forgiveness. He does not renounce the Decepticons. He never stops being Soundwave, but he becomes something more. A figure who transforms silence from suppression into substance, from avoidance into philosophy, from obedience into wisdom. He is never loud, never brash, but every moment is intentional, every silence chosen. So ask yourself, if silence can be loyalty, strategy, even love, then what is Soundwave, if not the purest echo of Megatron's dream? And if even he can evolve, who else might be listening? Because across the multiverse, there are many Soundwaves. Some loyal, some savage, some tragically misguided, but all of them, in their own way, are listening. Before we continue with the story of Soundwave, be sure to hit follow or subscribe on your podcast app if you're enjoying this exploration of Soundwave and his many incarnations. Disassembled Heroes and Villains drops new episodes every week, spotlighting the icons that shape pop culture. Next week, we explore the insanity of Tarn and the Decepticon Justice Division. Now, back to Soundwave. Across the vast IDW universe, Soundwave was not just a warrior, he was a believer, a teacher, a signal. But the multiverse doesn't repeat itself, it echoes. In some worlds, that echo is loyal. In others, it mutates into something monstrous, sometimes a ghost, sometimes a god. So what happens when we peer into these smaller worlds? The fractured timelines, the experiments in tone, the funhouse mirrors of continuity. What does Soundwave become when no one is listening? Not every Soundwave is a philosopher, not every Soundwave is silent, but across the multiverse, echoes of him persist, shaped by war, by culture, by the medium itself. But each version asks the same question: what is the cost of obedience in a world with new rules? In Transformers Cyberverse, Soundwave doesn't lurk from the shadows. He commands attention, through both ambition and theatrics. Here, he is a high-ranking Decepticon loyalist and battlefield commander, but far from emotionless. His minicons, Laserbeak and Ravage, aren't just tools. They're active, autonomous partners, given strong visual identity and purpose. Unlike the stoic Prime incarnation, this Soundwave speaks, X, and even taunts. He delights in sonic warfare, directing drones and dissonance like a maestro of chaos. His defining trait isn't silence, it's control. Whether jamming Autobot communications or coordinating precision strikes, Soundwave becomes the voice of Decepticon order, even in Megatron's absence. When Megatron X rises in Season 3, Soundwave aligns with the alternate tyrant. His allegiance, in this world, isn't to a leader, it's to Decepticon supremacy itself. Years earlier, the Unicron trilogy's final chapter offered a unique remix. In Transformers Cybertron, Soundwave emerges not as a warrior, but a sonic specter. Reimagined as a black and blue stealth bomber with DJ-inspired visual cues, the Soundwave speaks in a distorted radio-like cadence, combining static bursts, beatbox fragments, and robotic phrasing. His allegiance to sonic warfare is clearer than any ideological loyalty. He's not heavily featured. His roles center on espionage and artifact retrieval, assisting in the search for the Omega Lock and Cyberplanet keys. Here, Soundwave is more vibe than a voice, a stylized remix of an old frequency, rather than a deep reinvention. The live-action Michael Bay films reimagine Soundwave as something darker. First appearing in Revenge of the Fallen, Soundwave is a satellite in orbit, spying on Earth, intercepting transmissions, and hijacking global defense systems. He never sets foot on the battlefield, but his surveillance is omnipresent. In this role, he becomes a god above the clouds. By Dark of the Moon, he descends to Earth, now transformed into a sleek Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG, cold and unrepentant. He executes prisoners like Q without hesitation. His Minicon Laserbeak operates with terrifying autonomy, impersonating electronics, infiltrating homes, and assassinating humans without remorse. There is no growth, no redemption, just control and cruelty. Baver's Soundwave is unfeeling, unrepentant, and ultimately destroyed by Bumblebee, but his legacy lingers. A cautionary tale of what happens when information becomes a weapon too vast to control. In Earthspark, Soundwave exists in a world caught between war and rebirth. His iconic visor and voice modulator remain, but this time, the story is more complicated. Captured early in the series, Soundwave becomes a myth to younger Decepticons like Swindle and Hashtag. When he returns, he doesn't embrace peace, he challenges it. He still believes in Decepticon autonomy and cultural survival, not conquest. His methods remain militant, but his motives are closer to preservation than domination, aligning him more with IDW's introspective rebel than Bayverse's cold killer. In one standout confrontation, he openly challenges Megatron's alliance with humanity, accusing him of abandoning their shared cause. In this world, Soundwave is no relic. He's a resistor, a reminder that revolutions don't end just because the leader changes sides. Scattered throughout the franchise are experimental glimpses and novelty echoes of Soundwave. In Transformers Animated, he begins as a toy, built by humans, that slowly gains sentience. His design honors G1 roots, but his evolution from accessory to explores the threat of artificial intelligence gone unchecked. Shattered Glass flips the frequency completely, making Soundwave a freedom fighter. He's heroic, speaks often, and even wears a bandana, a tongue-in-cheek nod to rebellion. While entertaining, this version leans into novelty over nuance. And in Transformers Cyber Missions, a web-exclusive extension of the Bayverse toy line, Soundwave returns as a stealth specialist, but his characterization is thin, more function than figure, more utility than voice. Each of these Soundwaves offers a different signal, some static, some sharp, some haunting, but all reflect a singular truth. Soundwave is never just the soldier. He is the one who hears, who remembers, who records history not just with data, but with action. And now, a new signal is emerging, one born from the ashes of the old multiverse, and broadcast from a darker, quieter corner of space. In this new world, everything has changed, but Soundwave has returned. But the question is, which version? And what will he become in a universe still learning to speak? This is not a reboot, this is resurrection. Skybound's Energon Universe, launched with Void Arrivals and expanding through Transformers, G.I. Joe, and a web of crossover series, presents a familiar war and an unfamiliar key. The Autobots are fragmented, the Decepticons are mythologized. In Soundwave, he is the signal that never stops transmitting. After the arc crashes on Earth, Soundwave is reactivated by Teletran 1, alongside several other Decepticons. Yet, unlike Starscream, who rants and seizes attention, Soundwave re-enters the world with a ghost precision. His first words, Decepticon deploy, come not as a declaration, but as a reflex. This Soundwave is not reflective, not empathetic. He is cold steel, programmed with a singular purpose. He does not lead through charisma or fire. He leads through clarity, an unshakable belief in Decepticon supremacy. From the start, he operates alongside Starscream, coordinating missions with chilling efficiency. Ravage slinks across the battlefield like a living shadow. Laserbeak circles above, his screeches signaling imminent destruction. Rumble and Frenzy remain unseen, but their violent potential hum beneath the surface. As the war escalates, Starscream's recklessness begins to outpace Soundwave's tactics. When it becomes clear that someone must take control, Soundwave doesn't make a speech, he simply acts. He doesn't claim leadership, he assumes it. His demeanor never shifts, whether overseeing sabotage or deploying forces. He moves with calculated pragmatism. In Transformers issues 9 through 12, his strategy sharpens, not towards victory, but towards dominance. He begins laying the foundation for long-term Decepticon presence on Earth, focusing on structure and communications rather than spectacle. Even when Autobots like Optimus Prime reach out in diplomacy, Soundwave offers nothing in return. Not contempt, not rage, just silence. He is unmoved by hope. He is listening, calculating, preparing for orders or for a world where he no longer needs them. The Decepticons begin to splinter. Starscream grows erratic, launching chaotic assaults with little gain. Soundwave, in contrast, fortifies infrastructures, consolidates forces, weaponizes precision. The conflict tilts. The return of Megatron, violent, focused, and unmistakably alive, shatters any lingering ambiguity. Starscream's blunders are no longer up for debate, and when Megatron renders judgment, Soundwave does not protest. He does not flinch. He does not interfere. He listens. In that silence, Soundwave's role becomes clear, not as a usurper, but as the constant, the steward, the signal that waited patiently for its source. He has not been dethroned, because he never sat on the throne. He has been reinstated, reconnected. And so, as the Energon Universe spirals forward, its alliance is uncertain, its leadership fractured, Soundwave remains what he has always been, the unblinking eye in the storm. Because no matter who commands, Soundwave records, and when history plays back, it will be his voice. Soundwave doesn't need to shout to be heard. He doesn't need speeches, rage, or ambition to command attention. His power lies in stillness, in loyalty that endures beyond logic, and in a voice that only speaks when the message truly matters. Across every continuity, Marvel, G1, Animated, IDW, Prime, and the Energon Universe, Soundwave stands apart from the chaos he observes. He's not the tyrant calling for power. He's not the wildcard plotting betrayal. He is something colder, something deeper. A presence more than a personality. Function becomes identity. In G1, he is surveillance made sentient, a listener more than a leader. In Transformers Prime, he is the ghost in the machine, silent and omnipresent, where even a single phrase, Soundwave superior, becomes an acknowledgement of total dominance. In IDW, he evolves into something even more rare, a Decepticon who still believes in the cause, even after he stops believing in Megatron. His loyalty is not blind, it's conviction, programmed through purpose, a commitment to a world where the cast-offs, the silenced, and the broken can rise. But that conviction comes at a cost. Soundwave loses his identity beneath the mission. He sacrifices relationships, emotions, and at times, his very autonomy. Whether weaponizing silence on Megatron's behalf, or quietly assuming command in the Energon Universe, Soundwave never seeks the spotlight. He becomes the spotlight. When others scream to be heard, Soundwave listens. Where others flinch or falter, Soundwave records. And through him, a theme echoes louder than any transmission. The strong do not always shout. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they wait. Soundwave represents what happens when purpose becomes weaponized, when belief becomes so strong it erases the self. Because in his loyalty, he enables atrocities. Because in his silence, others speak through him. Because in his restraint, he becomes the hand, not the voice. And yet, there is something noble there too, a consistency, a code, and a faction built on betrayal. Soundwave is the one who never breaks. Even when Megatron falls, even when the war becomes directionless, even when the world stops listening, Soundwave never stops transmitting. He teaches us that legacy isn't just action, it's presence. At the quiet ones still shape history. At the watchers remember everything. So when we ask, what lesson does Soundwave leave behind? The answer isn't in what he says, it's in what he doesn't. Because one day, the war will end, but the signal will endure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive through one of the most popular characters in Transformers history, the superior Soundwave. Soundwave doesn't shout, he doesn't argue, he doesn't beg for loyalty. He earns it, not through charisma, not through violence, but through unwavering purpose. Across every continuity, he watches, he listens, he endures. In G1, he was the voice that never cracked. In Prime, the shadow that never blinked. In IDW, the believer who stayed long after the cause lost its meaning. And now, in the Energon Universe, he returns again, silent, strategic, inevitable. He is the Decepticon, the one who never falters, the one who always remembers. Even when Megatron falls, even when Starscream schemes, even when the war forgets what it's fighting for, Soundwave keeps transmitting. Because in a faction built on ambition and betrayal, Soundwave offers something else: consistency, conviction, control. And that is what makes him terrifying. Not his weapons, not his voice, but his silence. Because silence, real silence, is not emptiness. It's intent, it's pressure, it's power waiting to be used. So if you ever felt like the quiet one, the one who watches, records, remembers, the one who doesn't need to be allowed to be right, then maybe you've understood Soundwave all along. He teaches us that leadership doesn't always speak, that loyalty doesn't always waver, and that sometimes the strongest voices say nothing at all. So stay focused, stay loyal, and as always, stay handsome. And remember, you don't have to be the loudest in the room to be the one they listen to when it matters most.